Thank you.
Well, welcome everybody to Brainstorming the Human Connection. It's brought to you by the South Dakota Humanities Council. And we remind you that this is a program that almost requires participation if it's to be successful in terms of what you can get out of it. So we like to have people ask questions, have comments, and be thinking about what our discussion. And I have a feeling that most of the people who sign up actually have something of value to contribute to the various conversations, and for various reasons they're shy or something like that, and they don't. But those your comments and your ideas are valuable. We try to make it a safe space where people are polite and everything, and that's been the case. But for some people, they're still shy. So, but we welcome everybody's comments. We value comments, and we value that people have different ideas. If they didn't, then this program wouldn't be relevant. And the whole idea is to share ideas with the idea that we can all learn from each other, and we get great value out of even having stress put on our ideas. We might think of our ideas that may still be valuable to us, but we may think of them in a different way. So I want to reiterate that this is very useful only if you make use of it. So with that said, I'd like to introduce our guest, Nicole Schutter. And Nicole is the assistant professor, teacher education department. Oh, she's the teacher education department chair, and she's an assistant professor at Northern State University. And today our topic is going to be teacher recruitment and retention. We know that we have quite a bit of problem around the state acquiring and retaining teachers. And if we're going to have an educational experience that our children can benefit from, we will need teachers. I mean, that's a pretty straightforward connection. So with that, welcome, Nicole.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Let's start off by letting our audience and participants know a little bit about you. Where did you come from, and how did you get here? How did you get into Aberdeen and Northern?
Sure. Well, I hopefully won't go into too great of detail that bores everyone, but I am originally from Elk Point, South Dakota. I'm born and raised in South Dakota, lifelong South Dakotan, and good educational experiences down that way in the southeast part of the state. Decided to go into elementary education when I was in high school, and so made my way to USD and became part of their teacher education program. I was able to then start teaching in the Gayville-Volland School District, so small school in between kind of Vermilion and Yankton. Had a good experience there and was able to also participate in the PDC program, or Professional Development Center program through USD, where I was able to be a first-year teacher, and I was assigned a specific mentor within the school district. But then I was also able to start working on my master's degree right away and work with my mentor as she also completed her master's degree. So a really good learning opportunity through that, and was mentored, which was a very good experience as a first-year teacher. Made my way over to Vermilion and taught in the middle school there for a couple of years. And then as my husband and I started our family, I went and taught back in Elk Point at Elk Point Jefferson High School. So I taught in the middle school there. And then we just decided to make a move with our family. We had 2 young girls at the time, and 12 years ago, moved up here to Aberdeen. He became one of the band directors over at Aberdeen Central, and I started teaching at Simmons Middle School here in Aberdeen. Taught 7th grade language arts for about 5 years. Jumped over to the elementary school and taught 5th grade for a year, and then became an elementary principal, and was the elementary principal at Mike Miller Elementary for the first 6 years that school was open. And then just this past fall made the move to Northern State. So a few different school districts throughout the state of South Dakota and a few different regions in South Dakota, but have thoroughly enjoyed being part of the educational field and scene. And so it's a wonderful profession. So I'm excited to talk about that today.
You have been doing a lot of work in recruitment and retention. Can you tell us a little bit about what your efforts have been and why you have to even be doing that?
Sure thing. Yes. So when I was teaching at Simmons Middle School, I decided that I wanted a little bit broader view on just the educational field and the profession in general, and kind of the why behind we as teachers were being asked to do some things, and why my administrators maybe made the decisions that they did. So I decided to seek out my principal practitioner degree and was able to earn a pre-K through 12 administrative degree through USD. And then from there, as I was working as an elementary principal, wanted to seek even a broader perspective and decided to work on my dissertation and earn my doctorate. And in that, I decided to study teacher recruitment and retention in South Dakota. It's been a long time, as you said, a concern of just being able to not only recruit our teachers in South Dakota, but then also keep them and keeping the good teachers that we do recruit. So that's been a long-standing problem here in South Dakota, and an issue that is pretty complex and has a lot of layers to it, but we need good teachers. I'm a mom, I'm a teacher, I'm an educator, I was a principal, and we need good teachers in our state. We need good teachers in our school. I'm a public school teacher. I've taught in public school my entire career. So public schooling is kind of the backbone of what we do. And, having good teachers in those public schools and in all schools is extremely important to make sure that we have the educational opportunities for our students, for our children as they're going through. And keeping them in South Dakota is imperative. We need to make sure that our state has the best and the brightest. And we have amazing students coming through our K through 12 programs. And so being able to keep them in our state and recruit them to teach future generations is extremely important. So that's kind of the why behind my whole work as far as my dissertation topic went. But yes, just very passionate about getting teachers to stay in South Dakota, but recruiting them to begin with, and kind of to use or steal Dan Heath's work as far as upstream. I'm not sure if any of you have read the book Upstream, but we need to dive into the problem as far as what are the roots of the problem. And even though it is a multi-layered issue, what can we do to make sure that we're recruiting the teachers that we need, and then also keeping them once we have them. So
can you talk a little bit about the challenges of first recruitment? What are the challenges of recruitment?
Again, multi-layered. And so I hate to continually say that, but there are quite a few different challenges. When we're talking South Dakota specifically, and my dissertation work focused on new teachers, so novice teachers, so those teachers who have between 0 and 5 years of teaching experience, getting them to stay or to come to South Dakota can be difficult. We're a rural state, which can be, I don't want to say overwhelming to individuals, but some individuals might not think that they fit well in a rural area if they haven't grown up in a rural area. So recruiting our students, so our K through 12 students, to come teachers, and then to keep them in our rural state because they grew up in this rural state is really important, because they're familiar with the areas. They're familiar with rural living, which is quite different than urban or suburban living. So that is one of the challenges, is just getting people in general to see the value in our rural ways of life, and kind of what some people would consider a slower pace. But just making sure that we are doing what we can to really sell ourselves and really say, this is a great state to live and to work and raise a family and that kind of thing. And so getting them to either come to our state if they're not from here, or stay, I think, is the big thing. That's one of the challenges. But one of the things that we hear over and over again is teacher salary. And it's true. Teacher salary is a concern. We're one of the lowest paid states, so to speak, as far as teacher salary is concerned. And while some people will say the cost of living is the reason for that, many of our surrounding states, North Dakota, Minnesota, Iowa, Nebraska, don't have the same cost of living as South Dakota does. They're actually a little bit lower, according to some reports. So, we can't continue to use that argument when those states are also paying teachers sometimes upwards of $10,000 more just across state borders. So it's really important that we're looking at that. Quite a few 7 years or so ago, the Blue Ribbon Task Force kind of focused on that too, of just increasing teacher pay is an important aspect. And we can't expect people to stay in a profession or even join a profession where they don't feel valued as far as their salary goes. So that layer or one aspect of it. Another challenge just tends to be the time and the commitment that teaching requires. Many people seem to think that teaching is kind of that 8 to 3, 9 months out of the year profession. And that's really not true. We as educators put a lot of time in, like most people do with their jobs, outside of the 8 to 3 time and outside of, late August to May, where teachers are working through the summer to prepare their classrooms for the next group of students that they have. They're working nights and weekends to make sure that their lessons are planned and well thought out. And they're working tirelessly to make sure that their students' needs are met. And so just really valuing them, and sometimes with that salary piece, but even just that appreciation and support piece as well, can be a challenge. So when we say, hey, please come teach for us, and we know that there's the time commitment, but then the salary that doesn't match, that can be a real challenge too. So it's that rural living piece, which most of us in South Dakota really enjoy, but not everyone understands. So recruiting people and selling ourselves that way. But then also the salary piece does play into it as well. Teaching is a tough position to be in sometimes, and it's a tough profession. It's the most rewarding. To me, it's the most noble profession there is, but it can be really challenging. And so we're seeing more and more of that, especially after the COVID, I don't want to say after, but after the COVID pandemic, it changed education quite a bit. It changed expectations quite a bit. And so that's another layer of some of the challenges that we're facing with teacher recruitment. But it can just be challenging to find people who are interested in the profession when other professions offer more money, other professions offer different benefits. So it can just be challenging that way.
Where do you and how do you recruit teachers?
That is a very good question. I think it really needs to start at the base. And what I mean by that is we have a really amazing program right now called Educators Rising. So Travis Lape, one of the administrators down in Harrisburg, has kind of kicked that off or spearheaded that and is the state director for that. But it's a grow your own program. So many of our high schools around the state of South Dakota have chapters, and many are interested in starting their own chapters as well. So we're really trying to, across the state, get that up and going even more. But that program just basically allows high school students interested in education really get their feet wet with it and really dive in and find out more about the teaching profession. So I think that's one place to start, is letting our students, our best and our brightest in the K through 12 world, kind of see what the profession is, the rewards of the profession that are beyond those monetary rewards, those kinds of things, and giving them the opportunity to really scope out areas of interest that they might have as far as teaching goes, giving them a network to build, introducing them to our teacher preparation programs across the state at our different colleges and universities, allowing us, as those teacher education programs, to chat with them about what opportunities we have for them, and what those job opportunities once they leave our programs might look like. So that's one way, is just definitely our grow your own models, as far as, our high school students who might be interested, getting them more interested, and then letting them know that staying in South Dakota to teach is a really good option. We have other opportunities too for recruitment just within our schools. We have a lot of amazing school staff that work as educational assistants. They work as paraprofessionals, and they do great work with our kids. And so even recruiting them and saying, hey, have you ever thought of finishing, starting or finishing your education degree, and becoming certified to be a teacher? I think that that's a really great way to really take a look at who we already have working with our kids who are doing amazing things, and recruiting them to become certified teachers. And then I think it's just casting a wider net and really trying to sell our story, like I said before, of selling our story of the state of South Dakota and rural ways of life and things like that, but also just selling ourselves as far as districts go. So then we have to take a look at, how are we branding our school districts? How are we marketing our school districts and saying, here are the great things about our schools, but also our communities. One of the things that I found in my dissertation work and in my research was that sense of belonging in communities can kind of make or break retention for teachers. So if they don't feel connected, so, I really love the program title of just the human connection piece of this, because that is ultimately, I think, what it comes down to is how do we ensure that our teachers, and this could probably be said for most professions in South Dakota and anywhere, how do we make sure that our teachers feel connected to their school community and feel that sense of belonging and support? And how do we make sure that they feel that sense of belonging in our broader community? What kinds of things can we get them involved with, and how can we truly support them, not just in their profession,
I'm on the program now,
but then also how can we make sure that they feel connected to other people in the community and other opportunities that they might enjoy hobby-wise and that kind of thing. So I think just really ultimately that human connection is important. So getting out there and selling ourselves.
One of the things that was quite interesting that you mentioned was getting people to sort of shadow teachers, or and I've been in countries where they start that like in third grade, and they have like the third graders teach the second graders, and then the fourth graders teach the third grader, come in and help with the third graders, whatever they learned. And they found like there were two benefits. One, if you're teaching something, you that's when you really have to know it, and that's when it gets solidified. And then two, they found that a lot of those kids, since they've been teaching all the way through K-12, when they get out, they even if they don't go into teaching per se, they know how to teach because they've been taught how to teach all along the way, and they have experience teaching.
Right. Yes, absolutely. And those are great ideas. And that is one of the things that we're seeing more and more in our high schools. And it was around, even when I was in high school, but becoming a teacher's assistant. So if you have an open period in your schedule as a high schooler and having that opportunity to go help out, maybe it was your favorite teacher, and then that's what sparks that interest. And that's what really kind of catapult you into the field of education. But our Ed Rising groups are doing more and more of that too, of providing almost internship opportunities, getting students out to see what teaching is all about and what's involved with it too, because there are realities to teaching that aren't always, as I say, rainbows and unicorns all the time. So, we need to make sure that people aren't kind of blinded by the rewards of things. We have to have real conversations about some of the challenges of teaching. Otherwise, we do lose them, within those first couple of years, because they have a perception that it's something that it's not. And it is, like I said, it's the most rewarding and noble profession there is. But we need to make sure that people are aware of what it entails as well. And so that can be one of the challenges, like we were alluding to earlier, of recruiting teachers, but then also keeping them. So.
Let's talk about the retention a little bit more now and turn to that. But before we do, are there any questions from our esteemed panel here? And those of you on Facebook too, you can put your questions or comments in the chat, and we can respond to those. But anyone have any questions or comments? Going once, going twice. Well, we can continue then. And if you do have some comments or something, either put them in the chat or do that raise your hand thing, and then we'll keep looking out for you if something should spark your curiosity to want to know more about something Nicole says, or if you have some comment on something that she says. So let's go, Nicole, to the retention. And you kind of hinted at, the connection and the need for support, especially when you're first starting out. Can you talk a little bit more about what that means to a new teacher to have that support, and what happens when they do and don't have it?
Sure, absolutely. So yes, when we're talking about new teachers, and I don't want to say it's just new teachers, but again, my research was focused on that. So I can't fully speak to veteran teachers. However, I was one, I am one. So I do have some personal experience with that. But um, like I said before, that sense of belonging, not only in the school community, but the community as a whole is imperative. Teaching can be very lonely at times. There are challenges to the profession. And so, when you're dealing with challenging behaviors, maybe things like that, we kind of tend to go off on our own or become a little bit more siloed because we're trying to solve problems that we feel like no one else is experiencing, or we feel as though we have to have all of the answers. So it can be a very siloing kind of profession at times. And so for new teachers, that sense of belonging is huge, but so is administrative support. So support from principals, support from superintendents, and not just the, hey, we're here for you kind of thing, but really intentionally going in and checking on teachers on a regular basis, providing instructional strategies, classroom management strategies, things like that on an intentional level, which most administrators that I know do that. But also administrators are oftentimes overloaded and have a lot on their plates as well. So just systematically and systemically, it's really important that we broaden our scope on what support is offered to everyone in school systems, and that will help with the retention piece, but also just colleague support. So we tend to be very nice in the Midwest, and we tend to say, hey, how are you doing? And that kind of thing. And so that Midwest nice thing is great, but colleague support, that's very intentional. So we have a statewide mentoring program that any of the new teachers I talked to, they all said that was huge for them. So one of the factors that is allowing them the opportunity to stay where they are is the fact that they had a mentor built in, not just at the district level, but at the state level. They had someone there that they could turn to when they were frustrated, when they were, having a hard time managing something. And they really fell back on that mentor and relied on them a lot, which was great to hear because that's the purpose of that program. So just intentional support within the school system itself is huge to retention. And again, going back to the rural versus maybe a more urban or suburban setting, we tend to find that migration happens a lot. So we might see that new teachers will be in a school to get experience. They might be there for a couple of years, and then they'll move either to a larger district, or a school community that has more resources, different resources. It could be anything from more opportunities for entertainment when they're not working, that kind of thing, or just general resources, retail, shopping. So migration happens as well, which affects retention rates. So just offering up a lot of different opportunities for teachers. And that could be, again, for any profession. We have our rural schools and things like that that need teachers each year. So that intentional support is huge. And then that sense of belonging in a community is also imperative.
What does support? Oh, Betty has a question. Betty, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. This is really interesting to me on so many levels. I live in Aberdeen, it's my hometown, and I came back here after my working years were done in other places. I'm connected, at least superficially, to many groups of people in Aberdeen, from government to social organizations to art groups, etc. Not just in teaching, which I'm sure this happens, but also in our medical fields, we are lacking for retention of really good doctors and nurses, which is nationwide. But
right.
Aberdeen, and perhaps the state at large, doesn't have the best reputation when it comes to maintaining that welcoming feeling for some people. We have lost fine doctors, and I'm not sure about teachers, but we have lost some fine doctors and other medical professionals because their families were not welcomed here. They didn't find it comfortable to move into a neighborhood because they were not wanted there. And I would imagine that, Nicole, you are aware of this, and that would be part of your outreach program, not only to others in the teaching profession, but citizenry, the city councils, the county commissioners, the people in social organizations would be a good place to discuss that. we're kind of throwbacks here in South Dakota. And we need to get away from that. We need to move forward and embrace the diversity that can enrich, especially our children. I grew up here when Aberdeen was all white. And I didn't realize what a handicap that was until I moved out to the Pacific Northwest. I loved it. I had longed for that and didn't realize it. And I stayed there for 30 years. I came back to Aberdeen very deliberately because this is where I choose to live. And I'm having a great life here. But I feel terrible when I hear that another doctor has packed up his wife and children and moved away because they felt like outcasts here. So I just throw that out for discussion or consideration. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you, Betty. That is one of the factors. So like I mentioned quite a few times earlier, teacher recruitment and retention in our state, but in many areas is a multi-layered issue. And it definitely can come down to the sense of belonging felt by, you know, and Betty, as you shared, not just the person themselves, not just the professional that we're speaking of, but their family. If we don't have that community kind of rallying behind everyone and really, you know, we don't have to agree with everyone all the time. That's not, I think, what any of us are saying at all, but we can definitely have some good conversations and offer people opportunities to add to our communities in many different ways. And once we build those connections and really are able to enjoy those connections with each other and learn from each other, I think that that only strengthens our communities and definitely the teaching profession for our state and for our communities.
One of the questions that came up on Facebook was she's curious about most recent trends, and has our current governor's touting of our state's freedom had any significant positive or negative effect on the amount of teachers coming to or leaving South Dakota? Guess that's a tricky question for you, but
you know, I was going to say, yeah, I think that is one of the other layers to things right now, unfortunately, is the politics behind teaching, and I don't say behind teaching, but impacting teaching maybe. And I don't plan on speaking to that a lot, just because I think that that can get really divisive really quickly, and that's not the intention. You know, it could affect it. I really don't know. I don't know any kind of causality. I haven't dove into any of that specifically. Could it? Possibly. I don't have any research on that one way or another, but I do think that there are a lot of things going on right now, just in general in society, that are impacting teacher retention. Teachers losing voice in what they do each day definitely affects that. Teachers having autonomy, they are the experts in their field. They are the experts in their content and or their grade levels. And, you know, we need to be able to trust them, and we need to be able to understand that there is a rhyme or a reason, and there are best practices as to what they're doing each day, and that their primary objective is to support the students that they have in front of them. And so, you know, I think that autonomy or losing voice is definitely part of it. I'm not sure if that's what the question's referring to, and I can't speak to the causality on the question specifically, but right now teacher retention and recruitment, both of those are impacted by what is happening in society just in general. So making sure that we're respecting the teaching profession is huge as well. And that's where it comes to that sense of belonging and that level of respect and support that teachers are feeling.
Well, it would seem to me, and this is not necessarily prompting a comment from you, but I will say a comment from me, is that, you know, if you're a teacher and you're teaching something like science or something like that, and then you have some politician who's trying to tell you how to teach your science class or what is science and what isn't, but they fail science, that doesn't really encourage you to be a science teacher in that kind of climate, you know, and or any other subject. If you're the person that you put in the time and the effort to get things clarified to the point that you feel you can teach it, if someone who has some relative strength in concern and interest, let's say maybe they are not a professional, but they've spent a lot of time in history groups or something like that, have their facts right and stuff like that, if they challenge what you say or what you're doing, that's one thing. But to have the person who failed all his science classes, but somehow was good in politics, but trying to tell you how to teach that, I can't imagine that feels good as a teacher when when you're doing the best you can with their kids. So anyway, my heart goes out to teachers who are trying to struggle with that. So in terms of like supporting teachers, what kinds of things can their peers do to support them?
As far as colleagues, is that?
Yeah, your colleagues, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think providing a safe space for, I don't want to say complaining, because I don't know that complaining is super effective. If people need to vent once in a while, totally fine, but being willing to share ideas, being willing to share resources, things like that, offering up situations that maybe aren't exactly the same. I think in teaching, one of the best things about teaching is you don't ever have the same kind of day twice. We have new things that pop up all the time, and it makes it fun and exciting and challenging. But I think just being willing to share some of those resources, some of those stories of, I've been where you are, and here are the things that I did that seem to help. Maybe some of those things, would be beneficial for you. And for the most part, most teachers that I know, most educators that I know are very willing to do that. But again, it can be very siloing. And when we're all trying to do the best for the students we have in front of us, we don't always take the time, and we don't always have the time to really have those discussions. And so that's where I think, more system-wide support can kind of come in. And how can we offer teachers time? That's one of the challenges of teaching, is making sure that you have enough time in the day to get done with everything that you need to, because there isn't ever enough time. There's not enough hours in the day. And so, how can we best utilize our resources and each other to do that? Teaching isn't a competitive sport. And so I think just really being there to support each other, like I said, which most teachers are definitely willing to do, but being really intentional about it. So yes, greeting each other in the hallway is important, but really providing resources for each other and supporting each other on a different level is really important as well. So not any hard, fast, like here's the list of to-dos. I think it comes down to situational as well.
Yeah, my experience in both coming up and growing up and going to school, and also recently when I do residencies, because I do residencies in the schools. And one of the things that I found is that teachers seem to be supportive of their colleagues. They at least I didn't feel like there was a lot of, let's say, animosity between teachers or something. They seem to be pretty supportive. There is a question though about getting back to both recruitment and retention. What a percentage of public school teachers are retiring or will retire in the next few years, or looking to the future? What are we looking at in terms of numbers?
Right. As far as specific numbers, I don't have those in front of me, but I do know that the rate of retirement and the rate of teachers leaving the profession is much higher than the number of teacher candidates we have in the pipeline right now. So unfortunately, our retention rates are dropping. Our recruitment rates are not where they need to be, and then our retirements and teachers leaving the profession altogether are also increasing. And so we don't have enough kind of supply to meet the demand, if we want to use those kinds of terms, which I don't like to do when we're talking about people. But we have a high rate of people who are reaching retirement age, or who are or have opted to take early retirement or retired earlier than anticipated because of some of the challenges that we've started to face in education over the last few years. Especially teaching is becoming increasingly more difficult. So we don't have enough teachers right now in the pipeline. So that's where it becomes important that we start recruiting earlier on and really showing everyone what teaching is all about and the joys of teaching and how exciting it can be and how fun it can be and rewarding. But then also where we need to do some work with things like teacher salary, which I mean, we've been talking about in South Dakota for as long as I can remember, you know, so, and some of those other factors that are involved. So it again is multi-pronged, but we definitely don't have enough teachers to keep the number of positions open each year full. Each year for the last couple of years, we've started with at least 100 open positions in schools when the school year starts across the state. And so, and that's teaching positions. That's not including other school staff. So, you know, we are short on bus drivers right now. We're short on food service employees. We're short on school counselors. So it's not just teachers right now that we're facing. And that's part of the crisis as well, is it's definitely a teacher shortage, but it's a school staffing shortage right now. So
Let's turn for a moment to some specifics about certain kinds of teachers.
Sure.
That, you know, it can be really competitive. For example, if you have someone who is a scientist who actually understands science and actually has used science.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about how do you recruit people who are the science teachers, the tech teachers? In other words, if you know, if a person is really going to be teaching somebody in high school about
Mm-hmm.
computers, they actually have to be on the bleeding edge, because by the time that kid graduates, whatever they learn is probably, if it's just what we're doing now, it's going to be, you know, you can't even wait for a textbook, because by the time it's in the textbook, it's obsolete. How do you get the people who can help your child be competitive in that kind of tech world, or even to get to college and know the stuff that they need to know in college? How do you get them to come to a place like South Dakota?
I think that goes back to what we were talking about earlier of just really casting a really wide net and selling ourselves. So there are alternative certification processes that people can go through. So if I have someone who, let's say I need a welding teacher, and I have an amazing person who not only welds well, but can build relationships with students and can understand kind of the ins and outs of what that might look like. You know, there are alternative certification processes that can happen, which can be good. What we're seeing though, that's not great in some areas. We have places that are, and not South Dakota specifically, but in other areas of the country that are removing or lowering teacher certification requirements. And so then we have, maybe they're very good in a content area, or they're, you know, maybe they were like, to use your example, an amazing scientist, but if you can't teach that, you know, that's where we miss out, and that's where our students miss out. And so just making sure that we are finding those people. And to your point, how do we do that? It goes back to really selling ourselves, selling our communities, and letting people know what we have to offer as far as opportunities go outside of our school communities. And this is where it gets tricky, because there's no set list of here are all the boxes we need to check. It's a multi-pronged issue. So just reaching out and finding as many opportunities as we can to list our open jobs, you know, as many sites as possible, using social media for the benefit of that. So really selling ourselves and telling our own stories. If we don't tell our own stories, other people are going to do it for us. And that's not usually a good thing. So really making sure that we're telling our own stories and finding ways to communicate the type of people that we're looking for those positions. You know, not only just the content qualifications that we're looking for, but what kinds of things do we hope to inspire in our students through those classes and that kind of thing, and how can we use that to tell our story as well. So no real hard fast rules from my dissertation research and the work that I've done, just because that wasn't specifically what I was looking at either, if that makes sense. But just really trying to communicate what we're looking for and what we need for our students, so that our students can do as well as possible in the future. And that's where transfer of skills comes to be important as well. Content, we're always going to have information at our fingertips now. So learning the content is very important, but learning those skills and transferring those skills is important as well. So having people that can communicate that out and share that knowledge with our students is important.
Well, to that point, can you tell me some of the selling points that, a person would bring to some, let's say you're going to speak to a group of people who are looking for jobs as teachers, whether they're newly certified teachers or perhaps could be certified, they could be interested if, if the right conditions were there. You're selling South Dakota, and you're in a room of other people who are selling everything from New York to San Francisco, and they're all in this whole pool of people, this imaginary group of all the teachers. What is the selling point to South Dakota that you say, like, this is what we got for you, and we think it's wonderful? What are those points?
Oh, I mean, I honestly haven't put much thought into that just because of what I'm doing now. I guess I haven't really gone that direction, but for me, I guess I would fall back on my personal experiences. I grew up here. I've lived here my entire life. I've enjoyed it. Every place we live, every experience we have, there's going to be negatives to it, but the positives that I would definitely bring out would include kind of a family-based way of life, however you want to look at that. Moving here to Aberdeen 12 years ago, this has been a great place for us to raise our two girls and raise our kids. We've had ample opportunities to become involved in the community. And so I would really try to bring out some of those key points, whether it be a statewide push or even just a community type of push of, how we have been able to make connections and what kinds of areas we've been able to enjoy in Aberdeen. One of the things that we enjoy, even though we're dealing with massively low cold temperatures today, we enjoy the outdoors. We enjoy what South Dakota has to offer and the wide range of opportunity across the state that South Dakota has, and it's been a great place to live. And so I would kind of focus on quality of life as far as that is concerned. But I think it would just also depend on the actual audience I'm talking to and trying to speak to things that they would be interested in and getting to know them. I'm a big getting to know people kind of person. So that's the direction I would definitely take, but I suppose it would depend on who else was in the room and what we're trying to accomplish. So that probably doesn't answer your question very well.
Well, I think the reason I asked the question is like in sales, it gets to the point. In other words, if I'm trying to sell you something, I can't sell it from the point of view that my kid needs orthodontic work.
Absolutely.
It's like, or I want a new boat. I have to look at from your side, whoever you are,
right? What
can I do for you? And why should you, especially we know that it's not going to be money,
Correct.
So if it's not going to be money,
then what
it
is
would
it?
seem to me that the selling point, and if we say quality of life, and I hear that a lot in lots of different recruitment things,
right.
But if you can't define quality of life relative to what I need, then it's not a thing. You know what I mean? So I do. And I throw this out because it's not just, within the teachers, and the education field, but in a lot of fields where South Dakota needs people to function, right. and we have that deficit. I think part of it is we don't even believe our own sales script. And if you don't believe your own sales script, it's hard to sell, so if I can't go in confidence saying, man, look, this delicious ice cream has the best cherries you will ever taste. And
Well, and I think that's what I mean by, to me, it's important. If I was in a room of, let's say 25 people that I'm trying to recruit to come to South Dakota to teach, I want to know what they're interested in. For me, it's about, when I was hiring new teachers, I want to know what are they looking for? And then I can speak to that and I can be honest with them and I can have conversations about, do we offer those things or not? And so for me, if I'm moving to a place, so I'll use myself as an example, I want to know what service opportunities exist in the community. I want to know what opportunities exist for my children, for my husband. We enjoy, my husband's a band director and enjoys playing in our municipal band here in Aberdeen and enjoys other things like that. We enjoy going to concerts and we enjoy our Aberdeen Community Theater. So I would want to know, what are they looking for? If we've got younger teachers, then I can speak to that piece. Or if we've got people with families moving in, I can speak to that. So I think it does come down to, for me to be the one selling it, I need to know who I am actually talking to, and not just saying you have a group of teachers in front of you. That's fine, but there's still people, and there's still people that want that sense of belonging in our community. So I'm going to go back to that quite a bit, but I would want to know, what is it that they're looking for? And then I can speak to that and say, well, yeah, we absolutely offer great opportunities for hunting and fishing and kayaking and hiking and those kinds of things. Or, we have a lot of different service organizations in our community that would love to have you as part of their team, or, can speak to that more specifically. So I totally agree with you. It does get to a point where we have a broad scope of, well, it's just great here. It's just a great life. But I would definitely want to find out more of, what is it they're looking for on their move to South Dakota, or on their move to Aberdeen, or wherever it is that I am trying to sell, and then connect them with that, and kind of go from there. So.
Right. Well, I guess the way I have experienced, especially like in tourism, I think that they do a pretty good job of selling the state, and you can tell by the number of people who come here.
Mhm.
But they, they look at what they have in the state, and then they go out to find the people who want that, where are the pockets that they fit. I'm not saying it's a complete overlay, but if I think about it in terms of like, okay, what could Nicole and her posse do to round up all these people? It would just seems like we're the list of both family things, like you were talking about, hunting, fishing, if that's going to be the selling point, and professional things, and have a list of those things, so that somebody can say, when you go out to do your sales brochure, for example, to get people just to even come to your booth,
Mhm.
what are the talking points? And I would like to know those talking points, so when I meet people, I can say, this is what South Dakota, as a teacher, this is what we have. We're good at this. There's some things maybe not as the best, but here's some things we're really good at. And I haven't seen those things vis-a-vis teachers.
I agree with you. I think that is an area that we could definitely look at, as far as what can we do more of, how can we broadcast that a little bit more specifically to get people into the state to teach, and to me, keep the students that are interested in teaching in South Dakota and not running to other places to teach, especially when they see the dollar signs, which again, it can't be all money, and it's not all money. But no, I think I think you raised a really good point, as far as what are we doing to specifically sell, not just each individual school district, because we're all vying for the same candidates, but just the state as a whole. What can we do to bring quality teachers into our schools? So.
Well, going back to something Colby was talking about earlier, a question he asked, in terms of this, the pool of students just graduating from in South Dakota as a teacher, what do the numbers look like in terms of supply and demand? In other words, do we have like 100 students graduating, and we have like 95 people looking for students, or 105 looking for students, looking for new teachers? How do they match up? In other words, you might have 100 teachers, but they're all English teachers, and the districts need science teachers. Well, that's not happening.
I would say that's the biggest thing that I'm seeing right now is what we have as far as openings isn't necessarily matching what we're graduating in terms of those prepared teachers. So we have some extreme shortage areas. One of the things that we're really trying to do right now is recruit secondary education students to get more, whether it be your high school English, your high school math, your high school science, your high school social studies, getting those individuals into our programs, so that then we can prepare them to become those teachers, because we are seeing more of a shortage in those areas. Our special education teachers, again, another high shortage area. The unfortunate part is right now we're seeing shortages in all areas, where we used to not see them across the board the way that we are right now. So we are not filling them as quickly as they're opening, if that makes sense. As far as
Yes.
specific numbers, I don't have those. I know I did a quick search last night, just kind of thinking, hey, I wonder how many we still have open, and there's still over 100 open teaching positions in the state. But again, that could be anything from preschool teachers to, some of your more specialized areas as well. So it's not aligning the way that we need it to. And so that's where we really need to start getting to the root of the problem of why people are leaving in the first place. But then what can we do to recruit them, like we've been talking about as well. So
Right. So one of the important things in education period, it's going to come back to the general public and how the general public supports or doesn't support the school system. Not only just if you have a kid and but the general public, even if you don't have a kid or never
Right.
had kids, the school is going. As I often say to people who complain about paying taxes for schools, when you go in a nursing home, do you want people to be able to count to 10 when they give you your meds? So if you do, then you better be supporting the school. So
Absolutely.
so what can you tell us about public support, the need for public support, how teachers are feeling about, being supported by the general public?
I would say public support seems to be lacking. And if you are someone who is very supportive of your local teachers, of your local district, let them know they need to hear it. So I think if there are questions about what's going on in schools, if there is a question about what you're wondering is happening, feel free to ask, but do so in a respectful way. I think that's, and that goes back to kind of what we were talking about earlier of just kind of the politics behind things. Things get very divisive very quickly, and we've lost our ability, I think, just as a society. So this doesn't really have anything to do with teaching per se right now, but to really just have conversations like this and say, here's a question I have, or here is a concern that I have, and what are you thinking about that, and how can we move forward, or how can you help me understand? So I think, having had experiences where I have felt attacked as a public educator on many levels, personally, because of what I'm doing as a teacher or what I'm doing as a principal, when it has nothing to do with my personal side of things or personal life, it has to do with my professional life, and seeing my colleagues experience that same thing, seeing how social media is used to send a lot of backlash towards teachers or towards schools. Teachers and schools need our support in a number of ways. So like you said, whether that be through our tax dollars or through just that emotional support and that neighbor kind of support that we need to give each other. So my biggest recommendation is, we all should have a vested interest in what's happening in schools. Absolutely. But if we have questions about what's happening, feel free to ask, but please do so in a respectful way. And if you're disagreeing with something, feel free to reach out. But it doesn't need to be blasted all over social media either. Again, we need to go back to that, having good conversations that can be in disagreement, but doing so in a way that we can come to a resolution, and doing so that we can be better for it on the other side. And I think that's what it ultimately comes down to. I will say that is part of why some of our teachers are leaving, is because there is that lack of public support. There is that kind of growing, I don't want to say fear or anything like that, but that growing distaste of what they're experiencing as far as not feeling supported. So that's a growing concern as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, I certainly have noticed that, and it seems like people don't like at least public schools. It seems like there's a certain element in our society, they're in favor of school for their kids, but not for everybody's kids.
Mm-hmm.
And so the concept of public school seems to be under challenge. And in fact, I've heard people come out and say things like, well, public schools isn't in the Constitution, which is like, yeah, neither is roads, I mean, your street or something like that. But I mean, or there are things that, wasn't a thing, but they have to be now. So that's what I'm often faced with, is like, there seems to be almost like an anti-intellectual streak. And, it's like, and I don't mean intellectual like in beat poetry. I mean anti-intellectual like critical thinking and being able to do proper research to the point that I've had conversations with colleagues of mine who are university professors, and they actually complain. They say, look, students come here and they don't really know how to do research, and we're expecting that they do. So now they have these programs, but this was some years ago, and they were saying, they were almost like in a panic. They were saying, like we have kids who they're straight A kids, and so we think, okay, well, this kid, he's going to make it. But the research thing is not there. Now I'm finding that even among the general public, people, they even, let's say, they don't like it when you say, give me your data so I can see how that your data differs with mine. They don't have any data. It's all about opinions. So if education is going to deal with that, it seems that the public has to have a value for that before they can go to their school and say, hey, could you add a little bit more of that to your curriculum, so that my kid can be able to identify a logical fallacy, or at least 5 or 10 logical fallacies. He can be able to read a newspaper and point out that's a logical fallacy, or that wasn't supported. That person said that, and it may or may not be true, but we don't have any reason to believe it because there's no evidence was given. It just seems like a cape. When you graduate from high school, if you can't do that, then what was it all about?
Well, and I think that you bring up a lot of good points with that as far as people's opinions. And I think that sheds some light too on what teachers deal with on a regular basis. We can have differing opinions, but when it comes down to best practices, our teachers are the experts. They're the experts in their field. They're the experts in their grade levels and in their content areas. And so I think that that's some of what they feel unsupported about as well at times. And I think that that's continuing to grow as time goes on. And so
when you say grow, what did you mean? What's continuing to grow?
What I mean is the feeling of that lack of support in those areas, I think, is for them continuing to grow. And I never want to put words in anyone's mouth. So if there's teachers out there that are like, nope, I'm good, then I'm not speaking of them. But at the same time, I think that is something that we are experiencing more and more, is that their voice isn't being heard in what some of those challenges are. And so I think we're losing some teachers as a result of that.
Where do those teachers go?
What's that?
Where do those teachers go? Do they just stop teaching, or they go to other places and teach, or what?
I think that there are a lot of things that are coming out as far as what teachers are doing instead of, or in replacement of teaching. Definitely leaving the profession. There's a growing number of teachers who are leaving teaching altogether. We also have teachers who are, instead of teaching in your traditional classroom, are now teaching more online. So especially since kind of that March 2020 era of online school, now we have more virtual school options. And so we have teachers who are doing that, and because of family situations or whatever, or comfortability, they're choosing that direction. We have teachers who have been trained in pedagogy and trained in instructional design and are now instructional designers for corporate world types of positions. And so instead of in the actual education field, they've gone to other fields, other professions, and are utilizing their skills and their talents in those areas. So many are choosing to leave the profession altogether, which is unfortunate as well.
Right. Well, yeah, because now we're going to lose that experience and all of the investment that we've had in teachers. And we do make an investment all the way from, right from K-12. We make an investment in people to be teachers, because we know, at least some of us realize, that we need teachers, and we don't. And without them, we have a bunch of dummies running the world, which can't be good for the country. If you're patriotic, but you want all your citizens to be stupid, I can't I can't really connect with that kind of idea. If somebody shows me the logical connection, then I'm saying it's not a thing. At any rate, we're right at at the end of our quick passing hour. There's so many more things, Nicole, that I would like to explore with you about teaching. And you're right up in my area, so sometime we have to get together and see what kind of co-conspiratorial things we can do to get to improve the quality and quantity of teachers that we bring to our state. I want to thank you so much for coming and being a part of this conversation. Thank you all, everybody, for joining us today, and hope you'll come next week, same time, same station. And we're going to be talking about what happens in the winter solstice and all of that, the winter time, the midwinter things, what's happening and what's unique in the feelings, or what do people do? So come and bring all your friends. Thank you, and good day.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay, bye.